Hi everyone, I'm Daniel, and we're back again this week for another discussion of a single card. And as you might be able to tell from the background, this one is going to be Gravedigger Shovel. This is a card I've actually seen quite a bit recently, which is weird to say because it's a weird card. Here's the card. It's a 2-cost asset in the Survivor class. It's got a single combat commit. It's got 2 action abilities. 1, to fight, getting +2 combat for the attack. And 2, discard Gravedigger Shovel, discover 1 clue at your location. This takes up a hand slot, which is kind of important for our discussion. Really, the discussion is about, does a card that does a little bit of everything do enough? Does it warrant a slot in your deck? Early on in this card's lifespan, well, Carcosa, which is when it came out, there weren't necessarily a ton of ways to fight or to get clues, and this especially came out with an investigator, William York, who thematically made sense with it. But nowadays, we can talk about this in terms of, well, what does this actually do for you in the deck? Does this fight enough? Does this get clues enough? And I think this starts with the question of what actually is a weapon anyway? Is this a weapon? It sure has the trait weapon on it, but really, a weapon is something that does multiple damage per action. You need this. I've talked about this ad nauseum on the channel, that doing just a basic fight is terrible, right? Most enemies have 2 or 3 or even more health. Very few just have 1. And you need to be prepared, especially if you're intending on being a main fighter of some sort, to be dealing extra damage. Now, there's other ways to get extra damage, but is this card going to be how you want to spend your turn? Are you going to be actually playing this for an action at some point and then spending your entire turn hitting a, I don't know, ghoul over the head? Maybe, but that doesn't seem very efficient or very useful. Like, what happens if you fail one of the tests? You're probably not killing the enemy altogether. So this really isn't the way. And yet, the design team has tried this, a one-handed weapon, essentially, to do just 1 damage at a time over and over again. And without fail, well, we'll get into ones that are a little better, but mostly they're kind of bad. I mean, here's Trench Knife from the very same set. This one gives you a boost, but doesn't really give you any extra damage, so it's pretty terrible. Gives you some weird engage action ability, but people don't play this. There's a level 1 card. Most of these, of course, are level 0 cards, right? These are one-handed melee assets. If you want to do extra damage, usually you're getting a gun or something with uses. At level 0, this is kind of what you have. Even at level 1, you get something kind of weird like this. Blackjack from Dunwich, also terrible. Blessed Blade came a little bit later, right? This has conditional extra damage, which is a bit better, but you need to be able to force that Elder Sign or Blessed Token reveal, and that's probably more trouble than it's worth when you're trying to deal with enemies that are chunky. So, now, there's a few other ones from the core set. We had Switchblade that gave you conditional extra damage as well if you succeed by 2. Harder to do, right? Especially when this doesn't give you any boost, especially with the investigators you got at the beginning of the game. But it's not unusable. It's pretty bad, but you can get the extra damage here. So all these other weapons look like sidearms, essentially, where you need to have like your gun in one hand and then your uh, some sort of offhand weapon like this for dealing the 3rd point of damage, and that's somewhat okay. Crowbar adds a little bit to this because now you, on turns where you don't actually need to fight, you can use it to get clues, which seems a lot like the shovel that we'll talk about more in a second. Pocket Knife is interesting because it's using the ability on it to get an extra resource. And I feel like this is getting closer to where this one-handed weapon needs to be, right? Also, I should mention Machete was the gold standard for a while, and now the new core set says too powerful. It needs to exhaust for the extra damage, which is, I think, fair. Pocket Knife is kind of cool because it says use it for the last point of damage. You can use it with the traps and other sorts of events that deal damage. This is cheap and gets you money and lets you use another skill. So I guess the bonus to hit on these is a little bit more important now. So Crowbar gives you +2, the Shovel gives you +2, the Pocket Knife probably, if you're playing it, gives you something like +2, maybe more. And then there's Polished Cane, also again in the new, not the new core, but the new Chapter 2 stuff. is trying to do the same thing. Here's an additional boost, and the extra rider of if it's an non-elite enemy and you succeed by 2 or more, you get to automatically evade the enemy. And these feel like more playable than the old, trench knife, etc. Um, I should probably have just thrown Fire Axe here too, because it sort of is a similar idea, or Sword Cane, which does something else. So all of these cards are trying to give you 1 damage pretty well, and then maybe some other rider, some other cool thing that you want to make use of. And I've been pretty impressed with Polish Cane and Pocket Knife in my plays so far. So now we need to go back and think about the card that we really want to talk about, which is Gravedigger Shovel. This isn't a weapon, okay? The other ability here has nothing to do with enemies. It has something to do with getting clues. So the trap that I've often seen people fall into in including cards in their deck that don't do the thing that they want it to do is that this doesn't actually deal with enemies. It just doesn't. And if you want to include it, you still need a density of +1 damage weapons in your deck. Like if you're doing a mulligan for a weapon, which you usually should do if you're fighting at all, this is not going to be something you should keep. It should show up later, if at all. But if you don't have a huge collection, maybe you have to throw this in. It's probably better than knife, and maybe better than knife, better than kukri, etc. I just think that the trap people play is this: it says weapon on it, so clearly it's good at dealing with enemies, and the answer is it's not. It's not a weapon. However, I think it has a lot of interesting uses to it. So it's probably worth saying, like, when is this the most efficient? When is this actually doing some work? Because I think it actually does some work. All right, so first off, we could talk about York. York is the guy that you kind of want to play this in, mostly because the discard synergy with him, right? So York's ability from chapter 1, don't know if he's coming back in chapter 2 anytime soon, is that he, after defeating enemies, can play an asset from his discard pile. So you can use the shovel as a commit on some earlier test, and then just play this over maybe something else that's in your hand slot that's out of uses. Maybe your baseball bat broke. I don't know. You could also just play this outright, discover the clue. Now it's in the bin for later use. That's pretty good. The top action you almost never really want to take unless you are out of ammo or you need to do that 3rd point of damage. And the +2 is quite good, right? That's actually pretty excellent. But really for York, it's the recursion part where you're getting some use out of it. Nowadays, I don't know if the action to discover the clue is all that good in him. When you have something like the Mysterious Raven, yes, you have to take the ally slot. Yes, you have to take the horror. But probably in solo, you could make some good use of this, where discovering a single clue is worth your time. Remember, this is not investigation, right? So you're able to bypass High Shroud. You're able to bypass a locked door, anything that keeps you from investigating. All those sorts of testless clue effects, I personally value highly. If you're playing 3-player, you sometimes run into the same thing, where it's easy to get to 2 clues off of some event, or maybe I don't know, something like a Mariner's Compass gets you the 2 clues, and then you're sitting around thinking, what do I do about that 3rd clue? And something testless is quite efficient. So solo's good, maybe 3-player also, it's reasonable. And York, but then also I think Bob, where I've played this most recently, you get the play action for free. You can also scavenge it back. There's ways to recur this thing, which I think are quite cool. Lastly, we've been talking about weapon. It's also a tool. So Wilson Richards, who likes tools, likes this for a lot of reasons. I think he can staple his ad hoc to it and get other tool effects just because this is in his play area. It's something that doesn't exhaust. It's something that doesn't have any uses. It's relatively cheap. So that's not bad, especially when I played Scarlet Keys a year or so ago. The Wilson Richards on the team, thanks Philion, did this because it's really good against concealed cards, right? That you only need the 1 damage, so to speak, in order to expose the concealed mini cards in the Scarlet Keys, and you're effectively getting a +3 for all those tests, and this only cost you 1. So there is other synergy that makes this card kind of worth it. kind of makes you think about it. It's not a weapon though. It it's strange to have that top ability when it's not really for it. And then you say, well, what is it for? It doesn't get a lot of clues and it doesn't deal with enemies. It doesn't belong in my deck. And my answer is yes, that's probably true. Unless you are playing something that is a little gimmicky and can use this sort of synergy that we've been talking about, you're better off just playing some other weapon and having events that get clues. Because the reality is the hand slot is the biggest ask here. It is a problem. Now, I know I like to only talk about one card in these videos, but it's kind of hard to talk about this one without mentioning that there's the other half of it, which is one hand slot is supposed to be the shovel, the other hand slot is supposed to be the lantern, right? That's the way they kind of were printed. You can see 36 and 37 in the Pat the Carcosa set card numbers. This one is really good. It's like the opposite of effects. So the investigate, you get -1 shroud for the investigation, different than +2, but probably better in some circumstances because you're trying to synergize this with failing by not that much. So you can use this for a look what I found, or maybe you just get the clue. And then the discard effect is deal 1 damage to an enemy at your location. This action does not provoke attacks of opportunity. So it's interesting. Like the discover 1 clue part, the testless clue, is more useful than I think dealing a single point of damage, although that could be to an aloof enemy. It could be to a boss, really. I mean, you can make use of that. And it's really just that the basic investigate for 1 clue is way better than your basic fight for +2 on the attack. So Lantern, I think, sees a lot more play than Gravedigger Shovel because you're using this as an investigation asset, just giving you essentially +1 all the time. It's kind of a weird magnifying glass that has another ability that you might be able to make use of. That's kind of like the difference between investigating and fighting in this game. You need to fight with extra damage, at least have some way. The problem is if you want both of these things, how are you dealing the extra damage? It's too action intensive to do like the fight and then discard with the lantern. Although that is kind of cool. I think York really wants maybe in solo like the lantern possibly, and then something else, or that actually fights, or you want the shovel for the clues and then also something else that fights. So it's kind of it's a dream to have both of them, but I don't think it actually makes a lot of sense. Sure, you can have extra hand slots, you can have your bandolier, your tool belt, that kind of stuff is neat, and I encourage you to play that way. If it works, I think in Wilson, you can probably make something like this work a little bit. But ultimately, these are just weird cards that are not so terrible that I've never wanted to include them in a deck or in something like a draft or sealed. I'm saying no way. But they're also not that great that makes me say, well, this card is doing a lot of work. Even though I've played them both and I've seen them played a decent amount, they're not actually, I think, competitive for the deck slot, even with a smaller card pool. But if it is in your deck, if you have played the card, I think while you're playing the game, you're going to make a lot of use of it. You're going to say, man, that 6 shroud location that we don't have an answer for, I got that clue. Or we have a single whippoorwill around who's bothering everyone, I have an answer for that. And that's what makes, I think, Survivors and this game kind of fun, is if you be able to use like every part of the card for something. All right, that's it for this video, except for I just want to briefly mention that there is a upgraded version of both of these that do a little bit extra in terms of the discard. They give it an extra clue or deal an extra damage if you remove them from the game. Otherwise, they both cost 1, so the recursion part's a lot cheaper and easier to do. I think that's cool, but not that many people have returned to Pat the Carcosa, so whatever. Anyway, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I don't know what I'll talk about next time, but this card, Gravedigger Shovel, has been on my mind a while. It's both bad and impressive. I think it's kind of a trap unless you know how to play with it, which is use it for the clue. All right, bye now.